Hello and welcome to Movie Phone. For Blockbuster Shrinks, press 1. Blockbuster Shrinks is playing now.
All right, it's the Redhead Family Therapy Guy,
And a mic.
and we're bringing you another podcast.
We
Dude.
are.
It's finally time for us to do the movie that is our intro.
Well, a funny thing, I've never even thought about it, but I have never seen it all the way through until this week when I watched it for
My wife-
the podcast.
My wife is yet to see it through. She falls asleep every time.
It is a slow mover.
Hello.
It's
Yeah, it is. It is. You got to be. I think we've watched it late at night. She'll be tired and she passes out. I wonder if it doesn't resonate for her in the same way that it resonates for me, maybe. But that music though.
Oh yeah, the music's great.
So,
As always,
so
I feel like with
great.
John Hughes movies, it's always good, and it's
Dude.
always in Chicago.
Yeah, I looked at, there was a filmography of the movies that he wrote and stuff, man. He did
Mhm.
some bomber, that whole era of
Yeah, he's done a
teeny
ton.
movies, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and was
Mhm.
it 16 Candles also? And then
Yeah, and I think Pretty
did
in
he do
Pink,
Home
Weird
Alone
Science.
too? Did he do Weird Science? Did he do Home Alone? I don't think Weird Science is a movie we can do, but I love that movie.
I know I've seen it a bunch.
It's so inappropriate.
I don't
It's
really
all-
remember.
It's all just teen sex,
yeah.
development curiosity.
Yeah, I remember as a kid or as a teenager being like, "This is awesome," but I'm sure as an adult I might look back and think,
I was
"Whoa,
horrified.
whoa,
Yeah, it was
what was I
horrifying.
watching?"
It's kind of horrifying. Yeah,
This
but
one
anyway,
wasn't
so-
bad. There really wasn't
so
a
good.
ton in it. I mean, there's some teenage talk in it.
I watched it
some
with my
curse
teenagers.
words,
I
but
watched it with my
wasn't.
teenagers.
It wasn't as bad as I
Well,
thought it might be, just because I'm used to. I mean, you think about 16 Candles or Pretty in Pink and I think, which one is it? Is it 16 or Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles? I can't remember which one of those. But I watched one of those 5 or 10 years ago, and there's just nudity and cursing in it. And it's
I think it was
rated,
16 Candles.
PG.
16 Candles is the opening scene where the girl's taking the shower, I think.
Yeah.
And Molly Ringwald's I wish I looked like that. It's hilarious. So this movie is so dang good. So right off, which character did you kind of identify with?
Yeah.
Or what about it was the identify with teen part?
Yeah, that's tough. I was trying to think about two different questions. One was, which character do I identify with, and which character do I just like in the movie?
Mhm.
Because I feel like maybe that was two separate answers for me, and so I'm curious
Okay.
as to your answers too. But I think for me, the one I identified with, oh man, I would think maybe, I don't, what's the blonde, the nerdy kid's name? I can't
Brian.
remember. Brian. Brian. So maybe identify with Brian. I mean, I did sports in high school, but I got really good
come on, you were
grades.
hunky. You were hunky in high school. You were a
I
handsome
guess
man.
Maybe
Handsome man.
maybe years ago.
You were playing the ladies.
I
Come
didn't
on,
really
dude.
care for high school all
Dude, I
that
freaking
much. So
hated
maybe I
high
was more
school.
like Judd Nelson, where I just was but I never would act I would never act like that to a teacher
Bender.
or anything like that. Yeah, Bender.
Mess with
but
the bull.
I think the girl, the one that was stealing, right, and lying, I think
So
she
funny.
was my favorite character out
She's
of them.
very interesting. I remember as a high schooler watching this movie and being fascinated and curious about what in the world is going on there, because that's my thing. I mean, I ended up in this world because I can't help but think about why people are the way that they are. And so I'm always curious, and so I've got all these ideas and theories, and now I have these feelings for personality types, so instantly the idea will click in my head, or I'll ask a couple questions and people will say one or two answers and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it, I get why you're like that. But I just can't help it. I can't help but be curious.
Well, and I
and
love
why the people are the way that they are.
I love how John Hughes you go through this this movie kind of building up to, oh my goodness, what's going on? Like there's more here than what we know. And then I love how it finally gets to
Yeah.
the sharing and the opening
Yeah,
up and then
that's
the
well,
connection with that. It's really cool.
it's
I feel
very
like he
cool.
did it really well.
He did it really, really well because
Hmm.
it wasn't just like sap. It was like really what high school's like. I mean, kids are that cruel to each other and they're unrefined in their relationship building skills. So they
Hmm.
go over the edge, they go too far, they say things that are hurtful. They don't, they're experimenting with, you know, the pecking order. They're experimenting with flirting. They're experimenting with jabbing. And so it really represents all of that really, really well, like in a very authentic way. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it holds up. And that was one of the reasons why I watched it with my teenagers, because like that's just what teenage life is like. You know what I mean? It's just a Shark Tank of trying to figure it
Yeah.
out, and
And it's
everybody's clunky at it, and everybody doesn't do it well. I mean,
one that's interesting. Go ahead.
in one respect, I was a little horrified by Bender. You know what I mean? Because he's so misogynistic and
Uh-huh.
like cruel.
Yes.
But I remember as a high schooler not at all thinking he was over the top at all.
Yeah.
Like I remember just being like, oh, I totally know the guys like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
At school.
Yeah. And that's kind of, it's interesting, just some of the responses from numerous of the characters. I was at one point I was thinking, man, if this were even like a college movie, like my college experience was way different than my high school experience, to that effect of, in college I feel like it didn't really matter, like everyone, you just kind of, you just befriended whoever was in your
Yeah, that
class and
was
like,
the
or
really cool progression that happened from high school to college. Like high school, it's all of this clicky social rules, and then you go to
mhm.
college and it just wasn't
It
that
like
way.
vanishes.
It
It's really
really is.
interesting.
It's really important. I think like that's to me one of the best reasons to go to college. You know what I mean? I think college is getting more and more worthless, but one of the good experiences about going to college is like high school, you feel clicked and you can't be in this group and you're identify as the jock or the smart kid or
Mhm.
the good kid or the rich kid or whatever. But then you go to college and it's still kind of there in form, but it's real transitory. Like you can
Yeah,
really transcend and experiment and hang out, and people are like more like being authentic because you've got like older people there that are like
there's a mix.
22, and
Yeah.
you've got kids coming out, so like there's a little bit of 13th grade in some ways, but then there's a whole other world, and then like professors are being cool and like treating you like adults, and you just get to experience and experiment with all of that in a way. Like, yeah,
Yep.
college was totally that for me because I felt really stuck maybe in a box in some ways, but then college it was like not at all, and I was like, whoa, that's totally different.
Yeah, and even like you bring up the professor, like in college, it is just such a different experience. And I thought it was so interesting. I mean, I remember being a kid and teachers. I mean, I don't know how teachers talk to students nowadays. I'm guessing probably nothing like this
Yeah,
teacher
dude,
was
no
talking.
way,
Or was he
dude.
the principal? I'm not
There's
really
a
sure
vice
what he
principal.
was. He
He
was
was
the
the
vice
vice
principal.
principal. So
Okay.
that which is perfect, right? Because he's like
Yeah.
actually the guy in charge, like, but he's like acting like he's the guy in charge.
But
It's
the
like
way he was
like
talking, I was
Uncle
like,
Rico or something.
whoa, that probably wouldn't fly today. But I
Well, and he
remember
grabbed
as a
him, dude.
kid,
Like he grabbed him, and then like in the closet, he's like totally just
yeah, he's
being
threatening
emotionally
them.
awful. But the thing is, like, dude, totally. I was in 10th grade, and we had this sub for like the class was like a social studies class, but it was called current events. And we had this sub, and he clearly was like just about to be retired old school teacher. Like he had like,
Uh-huh.
I'm from the 60s or 50s or something from him, you know. And one of the students was like a Bender character and like really like was like testing the sub. It was like a
Yeah.
good class. Like it was like a really mature class of students. And so there wasn't a lot of nonsense, but he was like really testing it. And dude, like the teacher like laid hands on him and like grabbed him and like choked him out and freaking threw him out. Threw him out. And I was like, oh dang. I was like, that would not happen
Well,
nowadays.
that was it, probably, right?
Yeah, that was,
Like
oh
there
yeah,
was
dude, that was
there was
it.
nothing
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
came
like
of
all of
it.
us kind of looked at each other like, oh dang, that was like
We better
because
be quiet.
you had the vibe, like you had the vibe of like, dude, this isn't the guy. Like this isn't the guy
Yeah.
to do this with. You know what I mean? It's like he's old, he seemed a little like emotionally fragile, You know what I mean? It's like this
Yeah.
teacher is not going to handle this well, buddy. Like, are you not aware? And like, it didn't go well, dude. Like, he wrecked that kid. I'm not
Could you
even kidding
imagine
you.
that happening today?
Yeah,
I feel like
it's
it'd be on
crazy.
YouTube
Oh,
and
it's totally,
the
yeah, dude.
news
Yeah,
channel
it'd be like 50,
within
yeah,
10
dude.
minutes.
Oh yeah, the school would be under investigation. That was just a matter of course. You know what I mean? That was just like, like, and
Yeah.
the thing
It
too
was
about the vice
crazy.
principal, he's like so awful to them. He's all like, I mean, everything about is just
Well, you do
authoritarian.
have to feel for them.
Oh no,
It's
yeah, yeah.
Saturday and
Yeah,
they're there for like 9 hours, which
he's
is
got to
blowing
be.
my mind.
No,
I
well, yeah,
never
especially
remember a Saturday detention all
no,
day.
that's not a
You
thing.
remember
That's
that? Yeah.
no, it's not a thing. It was morning detention. It was morning,
Yeah, exactly.
which is where the name of the movie comes from, right? Like,
Yeah, Breakfast Club.
yeah, like it was his son's, like what the son said they called their morning detention was the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no Saturday detention.
Saturday.
Like, give me
It's
that's
like
just movie.
8 o'clock, and he's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
we'll be done at 5 or something." I'm like, "What?
No,
You're
I
gonna be
know.
there all day Saturday?"
It's
And he's
not.
like,
It's
"For
not
the
a thing.
next 2 months,
It-
you have Saturday
yeah,
attendance." So that principal, that vice
Like, he
principal, is
just-
gonna work Saturday.
he
for
just
the next 2 months.
he just wanted double overtime, dude. That's all it was. He's getting
Yeah.
double overtime for sure.
It is Chicago. He's only making 30,000 a year. He's probably
You gotta
swimming in
brush up.
property taxes.
But the thing too though is it really, the cool thing about the caricature of the vice principal is it really emblematically kind of represented like the power structure that we all felt in high school. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Of like being told to do things. And the thing that's hilarious to me now is like as an adult, like Bender really was onto something because like you don't have to freaking listen to them. Like it's hilarious to me that in the halls of a high school, they really can tyrannically rain down on the student body and like make them be places and have to do this. And it's like, yeah, I think that's one of the things I really hated about high school. Like I am not a person that like wants to be told what to do. Like I'm my own person. And so that whole structure of requiring to be places and a bell ringing, like
I think that's what's
everything
so
about
freeing
that.
about college is you
Yeah.
determine your schedule, you determine what you want to take.
So everything about that from high school, I freaking hated.
Yeah,
I
did not like
hated
either.
it. Dude, I skipped 30 days of school my senior year, dude. And halfway through my senior year, I just stopped going to accounting. Like I had an accounting class, and once I knew I was accepted to NCWC, I was going to play golf. I was like, I don't need this grade, and I just didn't go. I really liked my English teacher, and I would go sit in the back of my English teacher's class. She'd let me, and I just didn't go to accounting. Like, just like I'm not going. I freaking hated it.
It's really an interesting thing that I find. I'll have conversations with people about, especially younger people. There's so much stress and anxiety over like GPA or graduating,
it's so
and
pathetic.
really, it's not like it's nothing to worry about. I mean, you can go to college.
Well,
You can
okay.
go to college without a high school diploma. You can get your GED. You can go to a community college, and they'll help you in the process of taking your classes to get what you need, and you'll be taking the classes you need for your associate's degree at the same time. Like, and if you can't, let's say you want to go to some school you didn't get into, most universities have a transfer GPA requirement. You just go to community college
For
go
2
for a
years,
semester,
bomb it. Yeah, knock
get
it out of
good
the park,
grades,
and then
and
go
then go and transfer whatever college
So
you
easy.
want, or whatever university.
It's just another system to negotiate, right?
It
One of the
is.
things that's really cool about the movie is, I don't know if you caught it, and I don't know if I caught it, but when I was doing some reading and stuff, do you know, is it Carl is the janitor? So like
Yeah,
in
the
the opening
janitor.
scenes, he was like student of the year or like
Oh, was
honorary
he?
student of the year. Like they show, I
didn't
caught
see that.
I caught that his picture was on the wall, but I didn't catch the label. But the label's like student of the year or something like that, right? And like he ends up the janitor, right? Which is such a fantastic commentary about like being successful or popular in high school means jack to any other place in the universe, which is so important to understand that like your success in high school almost means nothing about your success anywhere else in the world. I actually, not too long ago, I found my senior yearbook, and so I spontaneously started looking people up on Facebook. You know what I mean? And like, like the cute girls that I thought were hot that were just unattainable. I looked at some of them, I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? And guys that were like the popular guys of like clearly have fallen on hard times or whatever. It's like, it's fascinating like the
Yeah.
perceptions and structure of social hierarchy that exists, and then like how that translates to the real world, and it like doesn't, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't.
Yeah, high school. And it's interesting, right? Because that age, you know, everything is so important,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
hyper. You're
everything
hyper
has,
focused.
yeah, so much weight bearing down on it. And ultimately it's really just a tiny part, right? it doesn't
So
it
for
doesn't really
it's
weigh on anything
it's so
else in life.
infinitesimally small, but can be so important to your sense of
Yeah.
confidence or how you negotiate your identity, or you can just recover from that at college or as you step out, which again is another commentary that the movie just deals with. I mean, they do such a cool job of like when they're having that vulnerability scene of like talking about their parents and them articulating like what's hard in their
Hmm.
families and how like, gosh, are we going to become that? Like, is that who we are? Like that
Yeah.
we're going to become like, you know, we're going to project our need for success onto our athletic kid, or, you know, academic standards and success onto our kids. You know what I mean? So the fact that they articulated that and reflected on that, I really remember um, watching this and this movie communicating that message of like, oh, are you going to be like your parents? And I think I decided in conjunction with this movie, like, I am not going to be like my parents. You know, my parents have got their issues and they're wonderful people. I don't mean to demean them in any way. Well, they had some real issues, you know,
Mm.
alcoholism and drug use being part of it. And it wasn't crazy. I mean, it was a stable, you know, 60s loving parents that engaged in that. But I was like, I'm not like, I recognized it intuitively as it was an unhealthy way of coping with stress. And I intuitively recognized that it isolated them. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing it. You know, I just knew
Well,
it.
and I think sometimes, you know, I think for me, it's about understanding as a parent, there's things that I hope that my children can take away from me that are things that they
That
want
are
to
better.
magnify. And
Yeah.
then also there's things they take away from me where they're like, yeah, I don't want to do that, or I don't want
Yeah.
to
I'm
be
gonna
that
do
way.
better at that, or I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that differently. And this movie absolutely planted that seed by
Well,
asking
and
that question.
I really like that scene. So when they're sitting together having the talk, I really like I can't remember her name, but she's the girl that steals everything
Yeah.
and with the black
Allie, I
hair.
think it's Allie.
Is it
Is it
Allie?
Allie?
Okay. I
I think
love
that's what it
Allie
is.
because she just doesn't care. Like she throws it out there like, oh yeah, I just sleep with everyone.
She's totally lying.
and she just doesn't care. And I love it because that's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
I
Allie.
feel like how I am, where I will sometimes push the bounds just to see how someone responds, but I don't care what they think about me in that moment. I'm just doing it to try to get them to open up. And I feel like she does a great job to where
Yeah.
she kind of gets some movement in the
In the
conversation.
discussion, yeah, by
And
being
then she's like, oh yeah,
outlandish, by being
I'm a
by being
virgin
paradoxical.
also. Yeah,
One of my
it just cracks
my
me up. I love it.
one of my most favorite moments with her character, which is really subtle, is, you know, Emilio Estevez and Bender, you know, have their little you know, their macho like
Yeah,
pecking orders, you
wrestling
know,
thing or whatever.
because
Yeah.
Bender's like totally being awful to
Oh yeah.
Claire.
Yeah,
And
they're
so Emilio Estevez like does the honorable thing, is like, you know, standing up to her and he's all like, I'll kill you, man. And then like Emilio's like, let's go, and like totally works him over. And then he gets up, he's like, you know, I kill you, you know, or whatever. And he's like talking crap, you know, because he's been
oh yeah,
one
and he
up.
pulls
And
out
then he
the
pulls out the knife and he hits it in the
that
desk.
is
And then she
awesome.
just reaches over and like kleptos the knife. It gets me every, like, I laugh out loud every time because it's interesting. Like, it's like this klepto thing, but it's also like this diffusing thing. It's like, I'll just
Yep.
diffuse this real quick without anybody noticing.
Well, I
I
love
just think
her
it's
and the
so funny.
she plays it so well.
She's a
And it
brilliant. Yeah.
and you feel like, oh, um she's just kind of this weird person, but I think she's a lot smarter
Oh, she's super smart.
than what we
Yeah.
maybe give her credit for
No, I
as
think
an
she's super smart. I think she's
audience.
playing. I think she's playing games with the social structure, and she's this. She's this fifth element. She's the representation of the kids that didn't fit in to the social structure, right? She's just this anomaly of weirdness, right? Because like, come on, dude. Like every year there was some kid that just, you know, was probably Asperger's or something that just was an anomaly that didn't fit anywhere.
Yeah.
And like she's the representation of that. You know what I mean?
Well, and I love how she's there just to be there. Like she doesn't even
I didn't
need
have
to be
anything
there.
else to do.
She's just there. I don't really care so much for the ending where they transform her and then Emilio Estevez is like, oh,
finds her
whoa.
attractive.
There was because her personality is so there
so
is. I wish they would
Yeah.
highlight that.
Yeah, I think so.
more.
I'm with you.
Because I really feel like she's a cool character just as she is. She doesn't need to be transformed.
Right. But I think it also shows that like, the weird kid can fit in.
Yeah.
With just a little bit of support, with just a little bit of kindness, with Claire just showing her a little bit of kindness, she can fit in.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty.
I think they're trying to build, that point of we can all be friends.
We can bring each other in. And
I did want to know.
We can cross the boundaries of the social structures or whatever.
So I want to know for you then, who do you identify most with? And is your favorite one different than that?
Yeah. I would say the one I definitely identified the most with was Brian. And it wasn't because I was not a smart, not cool kid. I mean, I definitely was not a cool kid. I mean, I played sports, but I was not a cool kid at all.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my friends were the nerd kids. Like all of my, like I wasn't in those classes. I wasn't in all the like advanced classes, but all of my good friends were all in those classes, which is really fascinating. I was actually in the learning disabled. I had one learning disabled class, which then put me in a lower track with like all of my other classes. But all of my friends like went to Harvard and MIT and like Ivy League. So I guess I was smart, but just not smart enough to be in those classes. I was smart and interesting, and was with, and then all of those guys were just really good, smart, enjoyable people, But so I identified with that. And then, the part that I really identified with was, when they're having the vulnerability moment and connecting, and then the idea of like, well, how are we going to do, like, how are we going to negotiate this? Or can we negotiate, or can we say hi to each other in the hall?
Mm-hmm.
And Brian's like, well, I will.
I love that.
And then Claire's like, well, of course, there's no cost for him. Like he wants to be in the cool outsider club or the cool sports group or the cool, like, rich, popular people, so there's no social cost. And I really identified with, I would be nice to everybody. Like, that's just who I am as a person anyway. And of course I would, cross those, or I had the emotional maturity to realize that like I had the college mentality already in high school and thought the whole high school thing was stupid. And so, I really identified with that hurt of like, I like you, but I can't waste my social currency on being friends with you in high school. So I really felt that rejection, felt that I wasn't included because I was like,
which is so
goofy,
crazy because their whole complaint is they don't want to be a part of it because it takes so much energy and stress to maintain it. Well, and they're just like, but you want to be a part of it. And I always, like, as a high school kid, I'm still kind of that way. I just am friends with everyone. I don't care about that.
That's
obvious. It's obvious in my dress, right? If I'm not wearing the same thing I always wear, I'm in flip-flop, or I'm in like sandals and socks, or I'm in shorts and work meetings. It's like, I have to put on actual work pants. But my point being, I love that idea. Brian, I feel like that's what I identify a lot with, is this just nice guy that wants to kind of get along and befriend others. And I think it's so true of high school, where a lot of kids think that's what everyone wants. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is I could care less about any, like but that's just how
And then the second question of like, who do I really like? I think I really liked all of them except Claire. I didn't really is
Claire Molly Ringwald?
Yeah, she's just really one-dimensional and kind of stuck up or whatever. Like, I think she was sweet, and there was like a good side of her, like she just wanted to kind of be good or whatever. But I really liked all of the characters, and I think that's part of my personality too. Like, I like different people. Like, I like tough people. Like, I like people, that are not like everybody else. And I suppose they're
Yeah.
caricatures or representations of those groups, but I mean, but they're all really interesting.
Do you feel
So
like certain characters have less growth in the movie than others?
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, to me, the vulnerability moment is a manifestation of growth for all of them.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like they do that scene really well, and based on some of the stuff I read, they were given a lot of liberty to just play around and kind of
Oh,
experiment
cool.
with that scene where they just kind of went with like some of their high school experiences and kind of so like Emilio Estevez killed that scene, where he's
Yeah.
showing the shame of being a bully, you know what I mean, which is really profound and powerful, because how many guys connected with that, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I really liked all the characters, and I really my heart even I remember watching this as a kid and being like, holy crap, dude, that guy's being physically abused by his dad. And then like the
Yeah.
reality of like there are totally people in my circle that have abusive parents. Like, oh my gosh, dude. Like that's heavy stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the awkward, Allie is just such an interesting, fascinating character. Her complete rejection of social norms is fantastic and interesting. So yeah, I'm really fascinated. And Brian's just such a good kid. I mean, how intent, like how well did John Hughes, is that his name? Like
Hmm.
nail it with the whole perfection suicidal ideation thing, man. Like,
Oh,
geez
yeah.
Louise, man. What a ringer like that is of a portrayal of a certain population of like I have to academically be successful and
Yes.
achieve and feel that pressure. And because like I know kids that like had the 4.3 grade point averages, you know what I
Hmm.
mean, like, and that was like a thing, like I just didn't freaking care. So it was like it's something I didn't even understand. I'm like, I do not
Yeah,
understand
I didn't have
perfection.
that.
I don't have the perfection gene at all. Which is rife in our culture too, like our church culture, and
Uh-huh.
I just don't have it. Like it doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? So seeing somebody, articulated and portrayed in that way is really powerful.
Well,
And
and I
it,
I love how John Hughes in that scene, how he uses such a powerful tool. And I'm guessing he understands this, but humor. I
yeah,
love how it's such a
they're poking it,
sensitive, yeah,
but then they poke fun
delicate.
at each other. It's a really
Yeah.
great balance, isn't it? They do a
Well,
good
and
job.
and I love it's such a sensitive thing where Brian is sharing, right? This thing that's probably hard for him to share.
Oh gosh,
That,
yeah.
oh man, and then I don't remember what happens, but he's like, it's a flare gun. And everyone just
I was like
starts
laughing
laughing.
at, like making fun of him at his lame suicide attempt. Like, come on, man, if you're trying to commit suicide with a flare gun, really? Yeah, like it's fantastic. Yeah,
But
it's
humor is
great.
such a powerful
Yeah, it is.
tool.
Like to be able to make fun of somebody for trying to make
Yes.
suicide, commit suicide in that way
Well,
is fantastic.
and making fun of ourselves too in those moments
Yeah.
where he at first was like, it's not funny. And then he starts laughing. He's like, no, yeah, that is pretty funny.
He's like, yeah, that's really stupid. Yeah, it's great.
It's
You know what?
healing and it's
Yeah, it is
connecting
healing.
too,
Yes, it
right?
is, right? Because I
And I
like you can
love
make fun of
how,
me and I can like, yeah,
yes,
that is silly and why. And because it also really portrays like how silly it is to be suicidal over, not achieving perfection academically,
yeah, and I love how he uses that humor. And then there's something else that was mentioned and they kind of laugh about that too, and I can't remember who it was, but I love how he kind of uses that humor through that really sensitive period of sharing that really just drives home that point of, hey, there's a way to heal and connect through difficult times. Even for what was the Emilio Estevez's character's name? Even for some
Andrew.
Andrew, so even for someone who has done something to someone, right, where you feel a lot of shame and guilt, even you could see him feeling,
Yeah.
some relief through that moment. I just love that John Hughes is able to understand, how to have sensitivity in serious moment and then bring healing through
Yeah.
through humor.
The thing that's really cool too about the setup to that scene is that it's really Bender who creates the opportunity for connection, which is really fascinating that
Mhm.
this character that's functioning or struggling to function within like the norms of the social structure because of his trauma, he's pushing and challenging. But it's interesting that he leads the connection because it's really his sacrifice for the other kids to not get in trouble, which
Yeah,
is
I thought that
really
was really
great.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting and a really interesting metaphor of this kid that's kind of taking on everything, like, and seems to hate everybody, like, just is like, "Well, I'll just take one for the team." And he does, right? Like, he descends into the darkness of a closet in the emotionally, like, abusive, tirade of the vice principal character.
Well, and it's interesting because isn't it him in the beginning too? So he unscrews the door,
Yeah,
and then
that creates the
the
opportunity
vice
for all.
principal's like really upset, right?
Yeah,
And so isn't it at that point when he gets all the detentions because he keeps just
pushing
poking
it.
at the
Yeah,
vice principal?
yeah.
And so it's it's maybe not as visible in the beginning, but that's kind of his character throughout, right? Is to draw
To
the attention
initiate.
away so that
Yeah,
he can build an environment to where
they
connection can
can
happen.
happen. Yeah,
And
it's
I think
really
he
interesting.
wants it, right? He's acting like he doesn't. He's
Oh, of
acting
course, yeah.
like he doesn't care about anyone, but he's
Mhm.
creating these environments throughout the movie where it connects them more and more because he really wants it. And isn't
Yeah.
that an
Well, and
interesting
he
thought?
initiates it. Like, he initiates the conversation. He starts poking at each of the people. You know what I
Well,
mean?
it I think I agree 100%. And I think the interesting thing about that is how often is it that really when all you get from someone is pushing away when maybe what they really want is connection
Absolutely.
and they want a relationship and maybe just don't know how to
They don't.
create that,
Well, if they're being
right?
abused, they don't. If they're in
Yeah.
this toxic, cold, angry,
And they
emotionally
don't even
violent
have to
environment.
currently be in it either. It could be
Mhm.
from the past and they
Yeah,
still aren't sure how. And so that driving behavior makes us feel so, I think, hurt or distant or upset. But really, what they want the most is connection, and they just don't know
yeah.
how
Yeah, I
to
mean,
do
it's
it.
it's really fascinating that now as I reflect, like, he is the catalyst. He's the one that gets the door closed. He's
Yeah.
the one that instigates the conversations. He's the one that gets
Well,
them
and
trashed together with his
even when
stash.
he creates these environments and puts himself at risk to have them, but then he still is like hammering on these people because he just
Mhm.
doesn't know how to connect. And then
Right.
I feel like that starts to happen as he starts to learn. And I don't know that that's how John Hughes portrayed it, but that's how I see it, is that yeah, he creates these environments and doesn't know how to connect, and yet through the group of them all identifying with each other through their own struggles, the connection starts to naturally happen.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just life, right? I think John Hughes is really good at putting into movie these life lessons, and I think that's one of them, is that hey, when someone is pushing so hard, maybe really what they're asking for is
Mhm.
connection.
Well, of course, yeah. Well, and he's such a master at really addressing so many of these teen issues,
Yeah.
acceptance, identity, the consideration of pressures to succeed or to
Mhm.
maintain a persona. He has this great symbol of an authoritarian structure, and then even gets you thinking about the vice principal as the vice principal and Carl are having their drink or whatever. And,
Yeah.
the vice principal's like, you can't like the vice principal, but, your heart kind of goes out to the teacher that had this expectation that they were going to help kids and then just gets becomes disenchanted because they're just punks that just push all the time. You know what I mean? Or whatever. And And I love Carl's commentary of like, well, they didn't change. You changed.
Yeah, it's
You were a
really
high school
interesting,
kid
right?
too once, and you've forgotten
Which is
what you
such
were like.
a thing with us parents, right? I think the older most of us get, the harder it is for us to remember we were just like that, right?
Yeah, you
Or
were
we were
completely.
similar to that.
Well, I don't know. I read something, or my wife and I were talking about this. I can't remember how it came up, but it's, there's this whole phenomenon of like you literally can't remember what you didn't know once
Yeah.
you know something. So there's this aspect of parenting, where we want to be hard on our kids because they're being emotionally overreactive of acceptance or failure. And we're like, dude, just chill out. Because like we've had life experiences like, yeah,
Yeah.
high school doesn't freaking matter. And they're like,
Yep.
you don't understand. But it's like we learned that high school doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so, but it's hard for us to really put ourselves back into that mindset because like we learned that it didn't matter. And so it's really hard to kind of go there or to be sensitive when we want to just, we don't, we want to we do minimize or we don't appreciate.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because I think when we want, like when you care about someone, you want to fix it, right?
Yeah.
But to fix it, you need to understand. And I think as a parent, if you can't remember what it's like to be in that position, it's really hard to understand what to fix. And I think sometimes we just have to let go of understanding and just listen and be present, be with that person in their sharing.
Yeah, it's
and
hard.
and we can understand they're in pain even if we don't understand
Or we
why.
forget. Or we
Yeah.
forget how
Hmm.
intense that pain was. I think like I have echoes of it. Like I have echoes like when Molly Ringwald's character was like, well, they just want to be like us. So that sense of like feeling like an outsider, like it twinged me for a second. It was like my mind like remembered like how much I didn't feel like I
The
fit in
trauma
high
was
school. Yeah,
triggered.
I was like, oh gosh. And then and then all the rationality of like I'm a grown man and well adjusted and healthy and kind and a good person and have a fine ability to make good friendships. And then I was like, but still for that moment, being that like goofy outside teenager that isn't ever going to be included in the upper echelons of the social structures in high school. It's like it's just
Well, and it's
it's
interesting, it's interesting too, because in this movie from the 80s, one of the social issues was suicide, right? And
yeah.
that's unchanged to
Oh, it's
today.
proliferated times a billion.
And it is interesting because in this movie you see the pressure, and I think as adults we forget, right? Like you said, it's hard to remember. But I think that with evolution of technology and really just pressures going beyond just
I mean,
just
what a weird
high school,
yeah, yeah.
a high school social hierarchy, you have a bigger, wider social
And what a
hierarchy, which
weird
creates
one.
more pressure.
I mean,
Yeah.
what a weird one to negotiate, dude. I mean, social media and
Hmm.
likes and follows and Twitch accounts and
Well,
people watching people
how do
play
you
video
escape
games.
that, right? Like if you really had a hard
Mhm.
time in high school, I remember some kids, their parents would have them, I can't remember what it's called, zone variants to another high school. And that was like a redo.
Yeah,
But
because
how do you
nobody would
zone
know you.
variants social media?
Nope, not
You can
happening.
change your name, but your picture is going to stay the same. Like,
Yeah.
so
People are
there's
gonna
not
find you.
really an escape because it's so,
There is
like, it's
no
everywhere. It's
there's no fresh start, right? You
yeah.
can't really. Yeah, well, that's what's
So
it's like.
that increases pressure, right? I would think it
Yeah.
increases pressure,
Well, especially in
exponentially.
the woke, like you can, like your history can be rewrote, or you could legitimately learn something and change, and like you can
Yeah.
never escape that failure. Like if you're some 15-year-old kid that does something horrible and stupid, but you figure it out and you change, and like you can't ever escape like that picture that's on the internet or that video. God forbid now, a 20-second clip reel or a video that's inescapable. I can't even imagine.
Well, I think that that's a great point. We do these evaluations for youth in our work for them to we evaluate whether or not they can function, right, to be able to go and do certain things with our church. And I think that that's a great point. Is it's like, oh, I've had these issues in the past, and I've grown, and I can't escape that, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about within social things. And it's really a hard thing to manage, where it's like, hey, what you've done doesn't define you. But what is the likelihood of this keeping you from reaching your potential in certain environments and situations? And it's hard to separate that. And I think that that's important in life, is to realize, just because I have certain things in the past, and maybe that would exclude me from doing certain things, like if you've
Mm-hmm.
had a child molestation charge, working at a high school or a elementary school isn't a great place to be. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that you're bad or wrong. And I think we have to have a better understanding of that, right? It's not no, you can't escape this. It's what's best for you and your progression moving forward, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really hard struggle with this idea of, you're just you're just not letting me move forward, versus, no, we just want to, we want to look at how can you move forward
Mm-hmm.
while doing things that will be good for you and good for others. I think it's a really hard thing to manage
Yeah.
in our day and age, when, like you're saying, there's, with social media, with
You
technology,
can't
you
ever
can't
get a fresh start.
escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I think that's one of the things that was so important, about after high school, is having a fresh start at college, or a fresh start when I went on a mission. And then within the mission experience, there's all these fresh start opportunities. And
Hmm.
even in college, like, I loved that there was a new semester, because I felt like a new semester was a fresh start, new classes, new opportunities for social interactions. And so, I always like a fresh start. I always like and so, yeah, it seems like that could be a harder thing in this day and age. You know what
I
I mean?
think so. And I think we still have this common thing in this day and age, even when you progress beyond high school, which is, I need to do these steps. Like, I need to mark these boxes,
Oh
otherwise
gosh, I
I've
hate it.
failed.
Yeah.
And it's like in high school, it's like, oh, if I'm not a part of this group, then I'm not good, or I'm not cool, or I'm not. And I think some of that still comes forward, right, throughout life, where maybe in your work role, it's like, well, if I'm not ever the manager, or the uh, regional manager, or the president, or whatever, I don't know, whatever the titles are in your field, then I've failed, or I've not hit this. And so
Achieved.
it's almost like, yeah, we place such weight on certain things, and it creates this pressure and expectation that is unrealistic, because maybe those things aren't really what is going to help us with our best growth, but we think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's really a hard thing to manage throughout life, which is kind of, letting go of these expectations that we place on ourselves, and understanding that, hey, there's lots of things that I can do that bring value and
Yeah.
and happiness in my life.
Yeah. So I have a question for you of
Yeah.
something that still perplexes me. As much as I have all of this human development understanding and relationship understanding, and I consider myself a relationship expert there, and I think I get it, but there's still a part of me that doesn't get it, because it doesn't make sense, even though I think I understand and track why it is this way. But what is it about the Claire character falling for Bender? I just have such a hard time. And I remember in high school seeing these girls that I really liked, or even had some friendships with, or maybe was trying to like do the whole talking to thing, and, dating or whatever, which I didn't have any confidence or chops to negotiate that well in high school. But I just don't understand why these Claire characters go for these Bender types. You know what I mean? Like, do you understand that? Like, the girl and the thing that women seem to be attracted to, or some women are attracted to, in
Yeah.
the bad guy kind of scenario.
I don't. I mean, I have thoughts, but I think, of course, it's always there's gonna be a million, a lot of different reasons why, and it's gonna be individual to the person too.
Sure.
But I think part
But
of it
that's like a
might
thing,
be,
though.
yeah, I think part of it might be, shame, and so if I don't feel adequate, I don't feel good enough, but I have someone who is like, there's a connection to that, right? Because he doesn't treat her very nicely,
Dude, it's terrible. It's
and
terrible.
and
Like
yet,
I get when I was watching this last time, I was like, okay, where's the hook? Like, where's the moment that she saw this gleaming part? And then
well,
maybe it was that he put himself on the altar for everybody. You know what I mean?
maybe it's that she views herself in that way, and so there's a connection in this idea of, well, at least he sees the real me,
Mm.
and yet he still shows interest.
Yeah,
Where
because
if
he
people are
does
nice to
dissect
her,
them, right? Like he
yeah.
does, and he facilitates that insight
Well,
where
and the
he's dissecting
real
everyone.
me that she has is a lie, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's one
she's
dimensional. Yeah.
yeah, she's more than what she perceives. But I wonder if that's part of it, where if you're nice to someone who's in shame, they withdraw more.
Just feel
They can't
uncomfortable.
believe it. It's not. Whereas maybe there's
If you're
something to,
poking,
yeah, like,
yeah.
he, at least he knows I'm trash, but he still shows interest. Whereas someone who's nice,
Like you've
they
bought
don't
into the
they don't
lie.
actually, yeah, they don't actually
Yeah.
know. But the problem with
Yeah.
that
That's
is,
interesting.
if the person is just mean, then they're building this lie that you are not worth anything else, but at least I
Right.
care about you, so you're stuck with me. No one else
Right.
would. I think that's part of it. Sometimes, I don't know for Molly Ringwald's character, or Claire, I don't know for Claire if that's it, but she does come across to me as someone who cares a lot about what others think, right? She has this pressure, but doesn't feel like she is really that thing. I mean, that's
Right.
where pride comes from a lot of the times too, is this feeling of inadequacy, not measuring up, and saying these things that you want to be real but don't actually believe are.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like when she's trash, she's like, "Everybody loves me.
Uh-huh.
I'm the greatest." It's really funny.
I think that might be part of it. I'm sure, but like I said, I think it's individual to each person, right? There's probably different reasons why.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, but it's still this interesting like phenomenon that like cuz I didn't understand like I saw guys playing that game, with girls and I didn't understand like I just wanted to be honest. I just wanted to be forthright. I just wanted to know them and I didn't get like that whole gamey. I guess I just didn't have flirt skills. I probably don't have those playfully like flirt skills, which is, intriguing and interesting and fun or whatever. I think I'm just like, yeah, this is who I am. Like, what's up? You
Yeah,
know what I
I'm
mean?
pretty straightforward
Yeah.
also. I'm not sure. um I think that does change for a lot of people over time, but then you still see, there's still clients I work with that are older that fall into that bucket of, why do I keep going out with these men that
Yeah.
obviously don't care
Well,
about me based
I
on
think
all
it's
the situations I've been
I
through.
think it's interesting and fascinating as far as the playful dating scene, but that if that doesn't transition into mature, communication
Yeah.
and vulnerability, your relationship's going to be crap. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because marriages don't work if it's a game. Like it, like it
Yeah.
has to transition to we're on the same team, and the game is succeeding and surviving and thriving and growing in life, and we got to be teammates, not playfully. I mean, there can definitely needs to be playful banter and humor and joking, which
Well, there's
I
a
have in my
difference
marriage, but
between teasing and criticizing.
yeah,
And so, he comes across as very critical
dude, he's
in
brutal.
the
He's brutal.
movie. I
He's
don't
awful.
I don't perceive that as teasing, but then you kind of get a glimpse that maybe there is a softer side underneath, but you
Well,
don't get a lot of that.
no, well, they could have done maybe that a little bit different or better, but you know, he gets brutalized by
Yeah.
the teacher and he puts himself on the altar for everybody, right? So like, you know, he takes it well, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes an I mean, and sure, he poked the bear as far I mean, he poked the bull, so he got the horns, I guess. My dad used to say that all the time too.
Yeah. If
You
you,
mess with the bull, you'll get the horns. And I'm like, as a kid, I never understood. My dad had all these cliches, and I was like, I don't know what you're saying. You
yeah, when
know?
he said that, I just chuckled. I was like, yeah, I remember hearing that as a kid. I don't think I've
Yeah.
heard it lately, though. I don't
My
feel like I've
dad,
heard it
my
as an
dad
adult, but as a
was,
kid, yeah, I heard
my dad was the absolute master of cliches, dude. He had so many, and I was always like, it was like he was sharing cliches from like a bygone era. Like I think he was like, have I said this to you before? That he was like, I remember challenging him. He'd be like, you better bring a sack lunch and a lantern because it's gonna be a long night. And I'm like, what is a sack lunch? What is a lantern? And what are you talking about? Like
I
it's gonna be a
think that
long night. Like
that's
what? Are
probably what all kids think of their parents. Even my kids probably are like, "What is that?
What is that?
What are
What
you
are you
talking
talking
about?"
about? What's a rotary phone? What are you talking about?
You do know what a
Dial up.
sack lunch is, though, right?
Well, I do now. I don't know if as a kid I was like sack lunch. It was like a lunch box. It wasn't a sack lunch. It's like
I
I'm not
always
like a
had
paper
brown.
boy from the
I
50s,
always had the
30s.
brown paper bag lunches. That's
I
how.
did too, but like I didn't call it a sack. It wasn't a sack. It was, you know, it was like the thing I put on my book covers, you know? Yeah.
I wonder. And now I'm really curious to know what things I say that my girls are just like, "What?
Oh man.
What is
One of
that?"
my favorite ones I can't repeat on. It's a little too it's too expletive-y. My dad would throw down all the time, which I actually love. I think it's hilarious. I think it was one I thought was really funny. But he had so many, man. It was like he lived out of these cliches. Like my father is one big cliche.
I'm gonna have to write them down because I know there's certain things I say sometimes. My girls are like, "Well, wait, what's that?" And
We
then
have a
I'll
bunch of
sit and think, I'm like, "Oh yeah, they probably don't have any idea what I'm talking about."
my wife and I do a lot of movie quotes. Like and we use a lot of movie quotes from movies we've watched together
Yeah.
and then like laughed about it or whatever. So we have tons. Like we have tons. Like talk to me goose. Like I say talk to me goose all the time. We have this line from Lilo and Stitch that we say all the time. We have tons of lines that we say from movies. So yeah.
Oh, anything else? I feel
It's
like
a
there's a lot.
dang good
Yeah, there's a
show. I
lot of
mean,
different stuff. For such a movie, for a movie that seems so slow at times, he does pack a lot
it
into it. Like I
does.
feel like he does it really good. But I watched it now and I was like, man, I wonder if my kids like would think this is slow.
My kids really liked it. They really liked it. They really enjoyed it. Jack was, of course, like, "What is this? What's going on with that? Like, what is that?" You know what I mean? It was like really great. I really like one of the points we haven't talked about. I love the setup of the interaction with the parents, right? It really
Uh-huh.
sets up the movie and a lot of the context of discussion really well to see the parents interact with the kids and set the stage of like, well, who they are or where they from, you know, kind of
Yeah.
scenario. So yeah, he really does an incredible job of the nuances and the representation of the struggles of teens. I mean, he does a great
He
job.
does.
What do you think is the ultimate arc? Like, what do you take away from the ultimate arc of these characters? I always wondered,
Oh
like,
man.
I
Oh
always
no.
wondered, like, did they say hi to each other the next on Monday?
I know.
I always wonder that, like, did they? You know, did Molly Ring did not Molly Ring did the weird chick and Emilio Estevez like date?
I
You
know. And
know?
it seems kind of like, I mean, so you have the ending monologue, right?
Oh, so good.
That Brian writes. And the impression kind of that I feel like I get with the arc is that we are who we are and we're fine with that, which would make me think that they are going to be friends moving forward. because they accept each other as they are.
But
But it's
it's
hard
also,
because I think just Brian writes it, right?
yeah, he
Or
writes
is
that.
that the
Well, one of
point?
the,
Is they trust him to write it because he'll
yeah,
write what they all
he's
believe?
well, and it's interesting too because in one respect they've challenged the borders or boundaries of the social structure, but then he kind of reemphasizes the social structure, unless it's just an echoing commentary on like these are the representations of the cliques that we have to deal with in the
What do you
social environment.
think it is? Like, what do you think is the?
Well, I think the thing that the movie really grapples with is the identity development of the teen life, you know,
Hmm,
where I come from,
yeah,
who am I? And then because they're forced into this social interaction with each other, um, it challenges it, you know, they take risks with vulnerability and they cross the lines of the social structure through that vulnerability and they see something else, you know, and
yeah.
I imagine like we all do when we cross those social boundaries, like it affects us in a way towards our development in a healthy way where we get away from stereotypes and dogmatic like you know hard lines because that's not good. It's not good. I mean, tribalism is the ultimate social ill that's fueling conflict in our world. You know, the fact that we can't, you know, we see someone else. I mean, like, you know, historically, when we saw someone else as the other, you could kill them and do whatever because they weren't a part of our safety social structure and they were a threat to it. So we had to eliminate them because they could pillage and take our food and we would die.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so, like, there's been a proliferation, and I think there's a really interesting and difficult thing happening because, like, in the modern world, you know, though there's always going to be conflicts and wars and, you know, and side wars, you know, with Russia blasting through and like attacking Ukraine has really challenged like kind of the peaceful narrative of the world that we were in, you know,
Hmm.
that countries aren't going to do that anymore. Countries aren't going to just blatantly invade other countries. Like that's we've kind of moved beyond that and it's more passive and it's economic and it's you know vying for resources and alliances. But like you know it's creating this very us versus them ultimate story, you know, where, you know, China and Russia and I suppose North Korea and stuff are going to line up and some of the Middle East countries are going to line up together and the rest of the world, I mean, we have treaties, you know, with the European nations, you know, that if Russia pushes beyond Ukraine, like that's a world war that's going to happen. So it's I think it's just interesting. Sorry, that's a really huge tangent and I didn't mean to be political, but and there's no political bias in all that, but just this idea of I guess I'm relating how important it is to engage in being curious and experimenting
Yeah,
across the lines versus hating
yeah. That's a
someone
cool
because they're
point.
different than you. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
war happening because what, dude? Like what? Like what the hell, dude? Like why is there a war happening? And you know, but you look at the evolution of the political tension in America, you know, and it's so lame that it's dualistic when there's so much complexity to any one of these issues. And I'm never on one side or the other. Somebody could box me in, but I have really different and interesting questions and ideas for solutions for every single political issue. But everything is red and blue. It's so stupid and so dumb in a world that is so much more sophisticated and complex. You know, it's really interesting that we have the proliferation of information and so much nuance and so much interesting things to figure out what is true about anything. But then, like anything that matters politically, it's like red or blue. Like it's so dumb.
Well,
And
I think we
it
get
makes me
stuck
crazy that
right
that's
in
where
our
it's at.
world. Hmm.
And so I think this movie in this beginning world as a teen like is experimenting with that and we need it. We need to cross I don't know what the right word is, cross those lines and be curious and vulnerable and I think we'll find that there's more in common than there's different and we don't have to kill each other. You know?
Yeah.
Like, we don't, we don't have to like rob each other's resources and say that you're terrible and bad. So
Well,
you're the
yeah,
enemy.
maybe it's not even, I think that we do this all the time, right? And maybe it's not actual death that results, but it's, it's killing each other emotionally
Yeah.
and distancing ourselves from one another. um and we get stuck in our own worlds, and there's so much pain and hurt that gets developed through our histories, that things become so real and so damaging. And yeah, it can be hard to let go of. I think
Yeah.
that's a great point. And I think that one last thought I have about this movie that I kind of struggled with back and forth as I was watching it with Bender.
Yeah.
Bender comes across to me as a character that just wouldn't even show up to detention,
Right.
let alone stay.
Right.
And yet he shows up. And so, I think to your point, um, even if you are like a Bender, right? If you can just show up, then change can happen. So I think showing up and
Well, he's the
having the
catalyst.
conversations are
He's the
important.
that's the thing that's really fascinating, that's really struck me as we've been talking, is like he's literally the catalyst for the change and what opens up. He's the first one that's vulnerable, in the library, where he's like, this is what happens when you spill paint in the garage. And they're like, no way, that's not true. And Brian totally believes him, is like, holy crap, dude. Like, it's just like
Hmm.
the weight of that kind of hits you, right? And he's the one that gets everybody talking, and he's the one that puts himself on the altar. He's the one that introduces like the social lubricant of, experimenting with drugs, which creates a connection. And, it's just, it's interesting, that this misfit character plays such an essential role in everything that happens in the arc of the characters there. It's really fascinating, which is maybe what it takes, right? Because he's unsocialized or in pain, he doesn't play along with the social structure,
Well,
which
I
is
think,
really needed. I mean, that's what's needed.
I think, yeah, I think the hard thing is understanding and seeing that the the criticisms and the hurt,
Which are
the
awful.
meanness
It's
is
awful.
not that's not what's really going on for him. He's really seeking connection.
Right.
And that's what happens, right? Is we get stuck in our own worlds, and someone says something or does something, and we perceive it as they're attacking us or being mean to us, or whatever we perceive it as. And we're not able to see past, well, there's a
Well,
bigger issue here.
what's really interesting too is like
Happens all the
how
time in our
what's really interesting
relationships.
too with the criticism and stuff is Brian's really like, oh, I'll take your attention even if it's criticism. Like he kind of responds like,
Hmm.
yeah, he's being mean, but he's talking to me, so I'll just
Yeah.
answer it like really sincerely and honestly, and it's really cool. I
Well,
think
and
Brian opens up that
that's
opportunity.
the key, right? Is
Hmm.
it's about perspective, right?
Hmm.
And it's about
Because
how
maybe
we,
he's smart enough to have that perspective, right?
yeah. And I think that that's what's hard in our relationships, is we perceive an attack and then everything shuts down. And that's, I mean, to go to your point, kind of like of a more political, bigger scale,
We
we
vilify.
perceive, yeah, and then everything shuts down and nothing
Yeah,
progresses.
yeah. I mean,
And
that's what I
but
mean.
that's
That's
what happens in
and
our
what.
relationships all the
Yeah.
time, right?
Yep.
Is we perceive an attack, and
Yep.
then
We
we put the
we
wall up, and
yeah,
there's
we
not.
deem them as a monster. We deem
Yeah.
them as the enemy,
Yeah.
and we put up the wall, and so then it's unreconcilable, and then you're just going to have a war,
And
which is bad for everyone.
you have some of that happening, right? You have the little battle between, um oh, I can't remember his name now.
Emilio
The
Estevez or
Yeah,
Adam?
Emilio
Is it
Estevez.
Adam? What is it?
Is it Adam
Andrew? Andrew?
and Bender, right? You have some of this happening, but
It's Andrew.
you have enough influence in the room, I think. And I think Brian does a great job, like you said. And I think Claire, is it, no, not Claire, the klepto girl does a great job of being more, less reactive, more accepting
Right.
to helping this kind of flush out, and walls just not coming up altogether. It's
Yeah.
a really interesting thing that, there's some group dynamics there, but also, I can definitely see how in our relationships, and I think it's really interesting that I don't know John Hughes what exactly he was thinking. I'm sure he has a lot of thoughts because he's obviously a very intelligent person, but I love
Yeah, it's
how
masterful.
I love how, from a mental health perspective, you really can see group dynamics and individual interpersonal dynamics coming out, and how it really is true
Yeah, I mean,
in
for a
our
movie to
relationships.
get it so right, I mean, that's the thing, is that the meanness and the playfulness and it's so well done. Like, it's scripted and it's
Yeah,
written
it
down,
lasts
and they
time through
act it
time, right?
out. They act it out just great. Like, it doesn't feel acted. It feels like, oh, these are these personas and these are them interacting in this
When it
forced way.
feels true, because I didn't go
So
to high
good.
school in the early 80s. I went in
Yeah.
the 90s, but still, it feels, if that
Yeah.
felt true, the
100%.
dress was maybe not quite.
No,
I don't know. There were some dress standards that were
no,
similar,
dude. No,
but
they hit it. Come on,
but
dude. Late 80s,
well,
bro.
well, I mean, for when I was in high school, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm saying, the
There
archetypes
was
that they
some
have
weird dude. There
match
was this
high
guy
school
in our
time.
high school, the whole high school career. He had like his hair straight up, like 4 inches, 4 inches. And like that was who he was. He was like the 4 inch flat top guy for like the whole high school career. I don't know how he pulled it off, man. He
Oh
has a
man, that
lot of
reminds me of
hairspray.
Street Fighter. Who is it that has
Exactly.
the Street Fighter haircut like that?
The blonde hair,
Yeah, I
the
can't think of
Marine
his
guy.
name. Yeah, he's
Oh, what is he? He was the one I used too.
yeah.
I
In
could
the
grab
movie, he's the one that John Claude Van Damme plays. I
in
can't think of
Street
his name.
Fighter, I could grab you out of the air and backbreak you. I had that move down. If you jump
I
towards
did
me,
like Street Fighter a lot.
if you jump towards me, I was gonna grab you and break your back. I had that move figured out. I don't know how. I also could time that spinning up, that spinning backflip kick.
Uh-huh.
The Sonic kick, dude.
Yep.
Forget it. Doesn't know you. If you jumped at me in Street Fighter, I was going to beat you with that guy, with that character. I can't remember his
I
name, but
love Street Fighter. I never got into Mortal Kombat, but I played a lot
a
of
little
Street
bit.
Fighter.
Yeah, I played a lot of Street Fighter. Yeah, a ton. I played a ton of Street Fighter. Oh, you can.
Reminiscing.
Oh, you can. Jump. All those.
All right.
Good times, dude.
It was fun.
All right, that's a classic show right there.
Yeah, it's worth
That's
watching.
a good one. And hey, and now you know why it's our opening.
Yes. I don't know why it was our opening beyond. I just liked that. It's part of the movie I always remember growing up.
Was it my idea? I wrote that.
Yeah.
I wrote that little thing, but you guys, your wife kicked it out with figuring out how to do the doom.
Uh-huh.
Doom, doom.
Yeah, it was great.
Good times, folks.
All right. Adios.
Have a good one.